Hey folks, this is Dr. Emily Sherding with American Resiliency. Today, I want to talk a little with you about climate and food. For many of us who are interested in building resilience, food security is a top priority, and this is a topic with both practical and emotional concerns. A lot of us who are worried about food security, it's because we've been food insecure. I've been food insecure. As a child, I was never food insecure, but as an adult, I've had a couple of periods of pretty intense food insecurity. Once due to being super poor in my early 20s, and once due to a domestic violence related situation in my early 30s. At that time, I did what many parents have done and often went hungry to make sure my children had what they needed. So, getting to a place of stability, to a place of resilient stability, has been very personally important to me. And because of that, I think it's important and grounding to look at some baseline facts about food security for us here in the US. First point, big picture, this is America. We produce an absolutely incredible amount of food. I thought I'd take some video on my way to the river the last time I went to look for turtles. You can check out my beautiful food producing home territory, which gives you just a little window into why America is the #1 food exporter in the world by a large margin. However, about 1 in 6 Americans has some degree of food insecurity. That rate is higher in children. About 1 in 5 American children struggles with some degree of food insecurity in the home. So, when we think about climate change taking out the food supply, when many of us think about hunger in our families, should our first concern be pure food availability or food systems? Because I would argue we've already got a systems problem and that it's getting worse. You might not be aware of this. This is a big story that's developing and that isn't coming out of farm country. And we want people to hear it. It's a story that needs to be told. Prices for commodities, for corn, for wheat, they're really low right now. Let me show you. You may have heard about corn crops struggling and failing around the world and in America's southeast. Those reports are accurate, but you can see that corn is at a low that it hasn't seen since 2021. Internationally, also, despite the war with Ukraine going on for years now, wheat prices shouldn't be low, but they are. We can see that wheat is also at a low comparable to 2021. As commodities, corn and wheat are very low right now, but food prices remain high at the store. And there's increasing concern that commodity prices are being kept low, that this is another battle in the war between financial markets and the land, another attempt to knock off the last of the small and mid-sized producers. The smaller silos, the smaller grain holding operations are under a lot of pressure right now. And there's an appearance that the financial market is willing to take some hits in order to gain control of more of the agricultural sector. Gain control all the way to the ground with these artificially low prices. It's worth noting, even in this time when we're still in the good times, still in times of abundance here in the US, our current systems are not providing equitable access to healthy food. And the pressure to continue to globalize the food system, the pressure to continue to squish out small and mid-sized producers is very strong. We're in a moment where it's especially strong, but this globalized corporatized food system has shown us that it's not interested in providing us with healthy food. It provides us with processed food that's often full of chemicals and plastics, and processed foods are harming us. My generation has higher cancer rates than previous generations, and it's not just the lifestyle choices that we make. We're living in an increasingly toxic environment where healthy choices are increasingly difficult to access and where foods are often presented as healthy when they're actually highly processed, high in sugar, or recommended to be microwaved in disposable plastic packaging, which has become a totally normalized way to prepare food, to microwave it in plastic, which is a very effective way to get microplastics into your body. To build resilience, I think it's critical that we think about food systems. Building localized food systems that are focused on our community's food needs rather than corporate profit, is important for our health today, and it's critical for our climate resilience. Because as we look to the future, we're looking to a future with less overall food production. And I think it's evident what the current food system will do in a situation where its profits might not continue to grow. The current food system would prefer to cultivate need, to cultivate demand, of any sort. But if we want to cultivate resilience and sustainability, we need to examine and cultivate what would it take for us to be satisfied, for our needs to be met. This is the opposite in many ways of cultivating demand. And considering this, we should do it in the context of climate projection, because in a lot of the US, staple crops do need to change. I'm pulling up this map from ProPublica. A lot of people have seen their climate maps. Some beefs with some of the fine points, but I think generally they do a good job painting a big picture. And I like this one here particularly, which shows sort of the up down of staple grain yields. When we look at these changes as we move towards 2C, we can see that across the Southeast, there are a lot of projected drops. There's big drops in a lot of the Central Valley. When we see declines on this map, it doesn't necessarily mean inevitable decline, particularly if there's water in the system. What declines on this map mean are that corn and soy are going to decline. And that's true even if you have adequate water, because corn and soy have temperature requirements that are going to be exceeded in many parts of the US as we move towards 2C. Accordingly, that means we need to make a change. Looking to the southeast here, we're not talking about a no water situation. We're not talking about heat that would knock out the ability of plants to fix carbon. We are brushing against that in the climate projections. The limits of photosynthesis are being pushed in some parts of the tropics, but not here in the US. It's really important to remember that here in the US, we have better climate projections than most of the world, and we really shouldn't be seeing ourselves as primary victims. Here in America, in most of the US, in the near future, next 10 years, even if things go like totally cattywampus, totally completely crazy, we are still talking about a future climate that supports plant life, that supports a food system, and that can support us if we're willing to make changes. In the Southeast, for example, crops like cassava, millet, and sorghum are hot weather crops, tropical type crops today that could be cultivated as the region loses an ability to produce the temperate crops that are growing now. It is popular to talk about climate and crop failure, to think about the potential for global crop failure. That's a topic that's familiar enough now. It's a dependable way to freak people out and keep people focused on scarcity rather than our potential to change, to keep people focused on consumption rather than action. Here's how I would recommend you improve your food resilience as we look to a changing world. And that starts with very basic components as we think about how to shorten our personal supply chains. The first and most important component to consider is not anything that you can buy, it's time. Could you find more time to cook? Because if you have more time to cook, you can cook from more unprocessed and minimally processed ingredients like dry beans and lentils. Doing that will reduce your food costs and it will reduce your reliance on processed foods, which it's just a reality that most of us have some reliance on processed foods. Another way that you could make a change is to find choices that are more local. Part of my resilience strategy is to grow some of my own food. I focus on high nutrient rather than high calorie crops, and I get a lot of pleasure out of working in the garden and on the land. Some of my most interesting food plants are wild and native food plants, and cultivating these elements of my local food system, which can support biodiversity and landscape health, is something that really helps me find a sense of satisfaction. And cultivating satisfaction rather than demand, that's going to be at the emotional core of a healthy food system transformation. The sense of place, the sense of being part of an ecosystem, of contributing to an ecosystem as part of my food system, rather than consuming through a totally extractive food system. I find it to be very personally grounding. I think that that could be a good way to move forward. But not everybody lives in a place or has a body that allows them to do this kind of individual land work. However, every one of us can support a more localized food system. There are farmers markets all over the US now, and many parts of the US have CSAs, community supported agriculture. And I want to navigate this in my region because if you know this term, community supported agriculture, it's really easy to Google it and find out what's going on and help you get on board. We live in Region 6. Our local food system is great. There's like a million CSAs. Let's look at Region 1, which is often seen as a part of Iowa with a particularly extractive food economy. We can see that even in Region 1, there are many places that are doing vegetables, berries, meat, herbs, eggs. There are many ways that we can support local food systems. There are farmers working in all parts of the US, places where some people might not expect to do this work on the ground with skills that they have cultivated and developed in many cases over a generational time period. We don't have to do this alone. This is a situation where we can get on board. There are farmers who are doing this that are working against very difficult odds. There is not a lot of farm bill type support for these diverse local food system farms. So they need our support and we need their skills and abilities. Because, I think the home garden is going to continue to make a comeback, but for most people, that's going to provide a very small portion of your food. If you get 20% of your produce coming out of your garden, you're really hardcore. That's the truth of the matter. And when I was first thinking about this piece, I'll admit it, I was thinking about the whole food shortage angle. I know that's what people want to know. We have this drive to know where's the danger coming from? Where's the scarcity coming from? But then I thought about it from my life and how emotional this all is. And I thought about how many of the systems around us are designed to focus our attention on potential scarcity. And it made me mad. I don't want to be part of that. Not around food systems where there are so many farmers whose mission, whose core desire is to provide the localized, adaptable abundance our communities need to thrive. There are parts of the world where direct food scarcity is going to be a problem as the climate changes. There are parts of the world where it's a problem now. But that's not here. That's not us. And we don't need to be borrowing trouble and cultivating a sense of personal tragedy. We need to be building resilience. A lot of resilience, including food resilience, comes down to how do we manage our time and our resources? How do we build some more give into the system? This is an important time to push back against an exploitative food system. We can use our time and our resources to invest in, support, and create a localized food system. For almost all of the US, we are, of course, looking at change, but we're looking at change where there's still potential to grow. I hope you found it useful to take a moment and think about these things from what might be a different perspective. A perspective that notes we're being encouraged to fear food scarcity when we are far and away the world's largest food exporter. A perspective that notes many children in our communities go hungry while we are the world's largest food exporter. And a perspective where we take a look at how low commodity prices are, while prices at the grocery store are still pretty high. And I tell you what, in America's producer communities, we're not flat yet, and our farmers need our help. Well, thinking about your climate proof fantasy homestead can be a desirable escapist activity that lets us imagine ourselves in control of our circumstances. Instead of consuming doom as entertainment, there's practical stuff you could do today that'll help you build community and skills. If you've never cooked dry beans before, and I'm willing to bet like 70% of you haven't cooked dry beans before, you should give it a try. See how much highly storable protein is actually available for $5 in today's market and see what you can do to support a farmer in your area. A CSA share is a way to learn what crops grow in your area, see how they're doing, and learn how to cook them while supporting a local food system now. We don't have to do this alone. There is a community. We just need to put the pieces together and look towards what sustains us, what nurtures us, and what satisfies us instead of to our fear. We're in a bad situation. It's no joke. In climate, we're in a bad place, but we're not flat yet. We're moving into tougher territory, and we need better systems to take us through. We can build those systems today. Let's get ready. Folks, thanks for watching, and I want to thank everyone in the AR community for your contributions that are keeping this nonprofit going. If you want to donate, there's a link on the About page of our YouTube channel or on the top bar of our website, www.americanresiliency.org. I'm very grateful to our donors, to our volunteers, to everyone spreading the word online, and especially to everyone doing the work on the ground. Thanks for getting ready with me, and talk with you again soon.